Mass protests and strikes in Israel. Logical or emotional outrage? Mass protests in Israel after the recent killing of 6 young hostages. Are people using their heads or their hearts? Welcome to the channel. My name is James. I have read many articles on the protests. Let's discuss the protesters' views and a possible solution to murdered hostages. Yes, later we will discuss the psychological method to defeat hostage takers. But first, the protesters want the hostages home. All decent people do. God bless the protesters. But what solution do they have? Except some protesters claim Israel can safely withdraw from the Egypt-Gaza border. That's a big demand of Hamas. Would that be enough to get Hamas to release hostages? Maybe. But is that a safe strategy? In 2015, the United Nations noted there were 1,500 plus tunnels on that small 9-mile border. Egypt said they destroyed over 2,000 tunnels on that border. Previously, the Egyptian military claimed they destroyed over 3,000 tunnels on that border. Does even Hamas know the exact number of tunnels? Where'd that tunnel go? I was sure it's around here somewhere. Well, we know for sure many tunnels were rebuilt and many are still unknown to Israel. So a few tunnels, what's the big risk? We also know many Egyptians are Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas's sister organization. So likely Egyptian guards at the border are sympathetic to Hamas, or at least corrupt. With Iran's help, they could quickly smuggle many missiles in to bomb population centers in Israel, like Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. Why risk lives of hundreds of thousands of people for 50 hostages, or even 500 hostages? It doesn't make sense. And that is just the tunnels. If Israel leaves the Gaza-Egypt border, why can't Hamas just transport missiles above ground, above the tunnels, right into Gaza? Israel really needs to control that border. It's been a problem for decades now. Isn't protecting the state, the whole country, the government's #1 job? Not prioritizing a small number of hostage lives over the country? I know, it doesn't feel good to say that, but there is a conflict. The country's safety has to be the #1 priority. 90% of what I read that the protesters say is just nasty critique or blind hate for the Prime Minister Netanyahu. Everything Netanyahu does is bad. Everything he's done is bad. Everything he will do is bad. Come on. This is really rough. But let's say, okay, let's assume that's true. But what would they do differently? They don't say. Except some protesters say the government should make a deal and bring hostages home at any price. Make any deal, no matter how risky to Israel's population. That is dangerous, childish thinking. Many claim Prime Minister Netanyahu is against a hostage deal. But isn't this the same Prime Minister who made a hostage deal late last year? 100 plus hostages were released in that deal. It's called Operation Friendly Hand. Why would the Prime Minister now suddenly be against a hostage deal? Nobody explains that. But the first hostage deal was a ceasefire, temporary by definition. It lasted several weeks. Now Hamas demands an end to the war. That means withdrawal of all Israeli troops permanently. Also, blaming the Prime Minister of Israel for the recent killing of 6 hostages is bizarre. The entire reason Hamas now is killing hostages, threatening to kill more hostages, and releasing videos of them is due to the success of the war. They are desperate. They have no other cards to play. No missiles left. Their military is gone, basically. They're being mopped up week after week. By the way, The threat to kill hostages was always there since October 7th. Why are people acting like this is something new? Blaming an Israeli, like Netanyahu, for hostage deaths is exactly what Hamas does. When you agree with terrorist logic, something is wrong mentally. Hostages being killed were an almost inevitable result at the war's end. Did anyone really think these Islamist terrorists were going to just sit down and make a peace treaty and return all the hostages? Why are we not all giving credit to the Prime Minister for destroying Hamas and securing all the Gaza borders, for basically winning the war? Lastly, is Israel going to reward Hamas for killing 6 hostages recently by withdrawing all the troops from the borders and promising an end to the war? Does that sound a bit crazy? My advice: since October 7th, in my opinion, the general public needed to be advised to have the correct mindset. October 7th, all leaders needed to state as one that all hostages are assumed dead, and anyone that is returned is a blessing. So far, 117 blessings. Very nice. The politicians and media should have pushed this view. The fantasy that all will be returned safe and sound is a recipe for mental distress, and it's obvious in the protesters' views. One can't dwell on which hostages might have lived if some Hamas guard in some tunnel decided not to kill. Nobody can control that. The correct mindset is key to not letting the thought of hostages ruin your life. You have to focus on what is within your control. The same advice for anyone who has lost a loved one. You have to focus on the time you shared together when you were alive. To dwell on death or what could have been done differently is a recipe for mental illness. The protesters are mostly protesting reality, the reality they don't like and they can't fix. Understandable, but sad. They still need a leader to help them mentally. The country of Israel is divided. It's sad that the fantasy existed and still exists that the terrorist group Hamas is simply going to return all the hostages or allow them to be rescued. That never was logical thinking. It's a strange time, but in my opinion, Gaza now is just a distraction from the real problems. 2 big ones: Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran's nuclear weapons program. Those 2 problems Israel can solve, and much better sooner than later. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please like and subscribe. Want real Middle East news analysis? Come join my channel. See you next video. Cheers.